Jonathan Mercer adjusted the crimson tie at his throat as he walked through Elysium Central Park, the gravel beneath his polished shoes crunching like crushed glass. The summit had dragged on for hours, filled with endless speeches, posturing dignitaries, and veiled threats dressed up as trade proposals. His head ached from the noise of politics, and all he wanted was the quiet sanctuary of his penthouse and a glass of good whiskey. The twin suns of Elysium hung low in the sky, casting elongated shadows across silver-leaf trees and shimmering hedges that glowed faintly with their own bioluminescence. It was a rare moment of peace in a world that rarely offered any. Then he heard it, a laugh he knew better than his own. Heartbeat. Michael. His son's voice rang out, bright and unguarded, pulling Jonathan to a halt. He glanced through the sculpted hedge walls and froze. Michael was seated on a low bench beneath an arch of flowering branches, his academy-issued textbook balanced across his knees. Beside him, close enough for their shoulders to touch, sat an alien girl, perhaps a year his senior. Her skin was the color of pale azure crystal, faintly translucent where the evening light struck it, and intricate patterns seemed to shimmer faintly as she moved. Her hair fell in a silvery cascade over a worn orange jumpsuit, the kind distributed in the poorest districts of the city. Jonathan narrowed his eyes. Michael had leaned in, frowning over a page of complex equations. The girl tapped the book with a finger, her voice melodic yet firm. "No, see? You've got the equation backward. The gravitational constant comes first. Then you multiply by the mass values." Michael chewed on his lip, glancing at his notes. "But Professor Hendrick, your professor teaches the simplified human version," she interrupted gently, not unkind. "But Elysium is a triphasic system. If you want to understand how forces really behave here, you have to account for dimensional drift." Jonathan blinked. A child from Section 8, the city's most maligned slum, correcting his son's physics homework with precision better than half the academy staff. It would have been laughable, if not for the calm certainty in her tone, and the way Michael's pencil scratched, furiously to amend his work. When Jonathan stepped forward, the girl's posture stiffened instantly. Her hand closed around a battered backpack at her feet, as though ready to run. Michael's head snapped up, his expression shifting from surprise to guilt to a kind of stubborn defiance. "Dad, I can explain," Michael stammered, clutching his textbook to his chest. Jonathan raised both hands slowly, careful not to make the girl flinch. "It's all right, son." The girl studied him with luminous, wary eyes that held the weight of someone who had seen too many doors slammed in her face. Jonathan recognized the look, the measured readiness of the disadvantaged in the presence of power. He offered her a smile instead of questions. "I'm Jonathan Mercer," he said, pitching his voice low and steady. "And you are?" "Siri," she replied at last, her chin lifting a fraction. "Siri Nathal." Michael rushed in, words tumbling. "She's been helping me, Dad, with physics. She knows things none of my teachers know." Jonathan turned his attention back to the girl. Despite the ragged jumpsuit, despite the defensive line of her shoulders, there was a poise there that startled him. He had met senators with less dignity. "Well," he said finally, glancing at the lowering suns, "it's nearly dinner. Michael, we should be heading home." Disappointment flickered across his son's face. The girl began to rise, clearly preparing to vanish back into the slums. Jonathan hesitated. Protocol, image, the thousand unspoken rules of his station pressing down on him. He almost let her walk away. Almost, but something in her eyes stopped him. A stubborn kindness, a flash that reminded him achingly of his late wife. "You're welcome to join us," he said quietly. For dinner, both children stared at him in disbelief. Siri's lips parted as though she hadn't heard him correctly. "Really?" Michael whispered. "Really," Jonathan confirmed, surprising even himself. He held out a hand to the alien girl, who had just outshone a dozen professors. "Any friend of my son's is welcome in our home." And with that, the balance of 3 lives shifted. The first stone laid on a path none of them yet understood. The elevator's ascent was silent, but Jonathan felt the weight of the girl's awe pressing against the mirrored walls. Ciri Nathal stood slightly behind Michael, clutching her threadbare backpack as if someone might snatch it away at any moment. Her silver hair shimmered under the soft light strips, her wide eyes reflecting the city beyond. The skyline of Elysium stretched beneath them as the lift climbed the Terran Embassy's residential tower. Flowing architecture of spires and bridges glowed with bioluminescent veins, bending skyward as though defying gravity itself. From here, the Eastern District was little more than a dim smudge in the distance, half hidden by haze. "Your dwelling is very high," Ciri murmured, her voice carefully neutral. Her hands trembled just enough that Jonathan noticed. Michael grinned, trying to ease her nerves. "Dad says it's for security, but I think he just likes the view." Jonathan allowed himself a small smile. Both can be true. Sunrise over the crystalline mountains never gets old. The doors slid open onto polished marble flooring, the penthouse sweeping out before them in a flood of warm light. Sculptures from Earth, paintings imported from Terran galleries, sleek Elysian furniture arranged with impeccable balance. It was a home meant to impress visiting dignitaries as much as it was a place of refuge. Ciri stopped at the threshold, her gaze flicking from the soaring glass walls to the carefully curated art pieces. The faint pulse of her patterns brightened with her quickening heart. Jonathan caught the hesitation in her body, the almost imperceptible lean backward that spoke of someone accustomed to being unwelcome in such spaces. "Please," Jonathan said gently, gesturing toward the interior. "You're our guest tonight." Michael tugged her hand before she could retreat, pulling her into the open space with the enthusiasm only a child could muster. "Come on, you've got to see the balcony view. It looks like you can see half the planet." As the two disappeared down the corridor, their laughter echoing faintly, Jonathan moved into the kitchen alcove. He activated the wall console, scrolling through meal options. His fingers hovered for a moment before selecting a menu that blended Terran and Elysian cuisine, seared Terran roots with citrus glaze, spice-baked fowl from Earth, and a platter of local berry fruits. Something for both worlds, he thought. While the automated kitchen whirred to life, Jonathan tapped his COM unit, voice lowering. "Run a discrete background check. Eastern District, Section 8. Name, Sci-Fi Nathal. Daughter, Ciri. I need it within the hour." The word sat heavy in his mouth. He hated how quickly he had resorted to protocol, hated that suspicion and caution came as naturally as breathing. But he also knew he was responsible for his son's safety, and now, by extension, this strange girl's presence in their lives. By the time the children returned, breathless from their tour, the dining table was set with steaming dishes that filled the room with rich aromas. Jonathan noticed how Ciri lingered at the edge, reluctant to sit, until Michael pulled out a chair for her with exaggerated formality. "This is more food than my family sees in a week," she whispered before quickly lowering her gaze, embarrassed at the slip. Jonathan pretended not to notice her discomfort. "Please, try whatever you like." Throughout the meal, he observed quietly. Michael, normally reserved, talked more than Jonathan had heard in months. Ciri listened intently, adding clever remarks, her wit quick and precise. She spoke of the Eastern District Library with reverence, of sneaking into broken terminals just to hear fragments of old human broadcasts. She knew more Terran history than most of Jonathan's aides. Where had she come from, this child with brilliance shining through every worn seam of her clothes? Jonathan's COM unit vibrated against his wrist. The background report had arrived. He excused himself, stepping into his office. The file confirmed what Ciri had not said. Her mother, Sci-Fi, once a mid-level diplomatic aide, now suffering from Cascade Syndrome, their family 2 months behind on housing, eviction already looming, 3 younger siblings, survival day by day. Jonathan leaned against his desk, the report burning in his hand. He stared at the darkened window, watching the faint outline of the Eastern District. A child like Siri should be in the academy, not clutching broken terminals in a slum. Returning to the dining room, he found Siri helping Michael clear plates, insisting on contributing despite being a guest. That small act of dignity settled something inside him. When the meal ended and the stars over Elysium began their steady rise, Jonathan stood. "It's late. I'll have the shuttle take you home." Siri tensed. "Thank you, but I can walk. The transit lines are unsafe at this hour," Jonathan said gently. "Please, I insist." For the first time all evening, her eyes met his directly. He saw suspicion there, but also something else, hope, cautious and trembling. As the shuttle lifted away from the glowing towers, Jonathan made a decision. He would not let this girl disappear back into the shadows of Section 8, not when she had already begun to change the shape of his world. The shuttle glided eastward, its polished hull reflecting the shimmer of Elysium's nightscape. Towers of glass and light dwindled behind them, giving way to older structures hunched under centuries of patchwork repair. Street lamps flickered unevenly, casting the Eastern District in pools of dim gold and shadow. Jonathan sat across from Siri, his hands folded in his lap. Watching her watch the city dot, her gaze was not the gaze of a child. It was older, sharper. She counted cracks in walls, memorized exit routes, noticed every shift in the shuttle's hum, as though survival demanded constant vigilance. Michael, oblivious, pressed his nose against the window, narrating their route with the unshakable confidence of a boy who believed his father could fix anything. When the shuttle set down outside a leaning housing block, Jonathan understood why Siri had been reluctant. The structure sagged like a weary spine. Balconies had collapsed and been patched with scavenged metal. Neon graffiti glowed faintly on the walls, half protest, half plea. "Thank you for dinner, Mr. Mercer," Siri said, her voice stiff with formality. She clutched her backpack like a lifeline. "And for bringing me home." Jonathan leaned forward. "Is your mother home?" "I'd like to meet her, if she feels up to it." Alarm flashed across Siri's face. She stepped back, shoulders squared. "She's not well. She needs rest." Jonathan nodded, backing down. Pressing would be cruelty, not kindness. "Another time, perhaps." She gave a tiny bow, an old-fashioned gesture that belonged more to the vanished middle class than to Section 8. Then she vanished into the building, silver hair trailing like a wisp of light before the door clanged shut. Michael's voice was small in the echoing silence. "Dad, why do they live like this?" "It's not fair." Jonathan placed a hand on his son's shoulder, feeling the boy's confusion and indignation in equal measure. "No," he said quietly. "It's not fair. But perhaps we can do something about it." The shuttle lifted away, leaving the block behind like a wound in the city's skin. Jonathan stared out the window all the way back, mind racing. He thought of his late wife, her insistence that compassion was a diplomat's most powerful tool. He thought of Siri's eyes, clear and defiant even in threadbare clothes. And he thought of Michael, his son laughing freer than he had in years. The next morning, Jonathan's office filled with light from the twin suns. He stood at his desk, unit active. His voice was steady, clipped, the way it always was when he made decisions that would ripple outward. The first call went to his financial advisor. Anonymous transfer. Enough to erase the Nathal family's housing debt. Immediate. The second went to a contact at the Elysian Medical Council. Cascade Syndrome specialist. Have them make a scheduled visit to Section 8's clinic. Quietly. The third call was the most difficult. Ambassador Trelevic's image flickered into view, ridges along his face darkening in irritation. "Mercer," he said coldly, "to what do I owe the interruption?" Jonathan smiled, all polished diplomacy. "Ambassador, I'd like to discuss a potential initiative. An educational exchange, perhaps, between the Academy and the Eastern District." Trelevic's third eye narrowed. "You want to bring slum rats into our halls? What possible benefit could such charity bring?" Jonathan took a measured sip of his coffee, ignoring the insult. "Talent exists everywhere, Ambassador. Opportunity does not. Earth learned that centuries ago." The ambassador's ridges pulsed with disdain. "How very human. Forever believing you can remake societies to your image." "Perhaps," Jonathan conceded smoothly. "But consider the practical benefits. Brilliant minds, currently wasted, trained to serve Elysium itself. Imagine Eastern District graduates mediating disputes, advancing research, all loyal to the world that gave them a chance." The silence stretched, taut as wire. Then Trelevic leaned forward, voice dripping venom. "Goodwill and idealism will not protect you in the council chambers. Remember that." The screen went dark. Jonathan exhaled slowly, his composure never breaking. He knew what he had just done, planted the seed of change in the most hostile soil imaginable. Hours later, Michael bounded into his study, Siri trailing behind, her eyes suspicious but curious. Jonathan saw in them both the first fragile shoots of something larger than himself, a partnership between worlds that had never been truly equal. He rose, folding his hands behind his back. "I've been thinking," he said. "Perhaps it's time. Elysium learned what happens when children like you are given a chance." Siri's patterns shimmered faintly across her skin, uncertain, hopeful. Michael's grin was immediate, bright as the sun's dot, and Jonathan Mercer knew, in that moment, that the decision he had made would either become his greatest achievement or the beginning of a war he could not yet see. 5 years passed, and the laughter that once echoed in a park now carried across the marble courtyards of the Diplomatic Academy. Jonathan Mercer often watched from a distance, pretending to be just another visiting dignitary rather than the father of a student. His son had shed the lanky awkwardness of childhood. Michael stood taller now, his shoulders straight, his voice calm and steady. The boy who once clutched a physics textbook in terror had become a young man with quiet confidence, and at his side, as always, was Siri Nath Al. The Eastern District Initiative had grown from Jonathan's whispered phone calls into something far larger. Dozens of children from Section 8 now walked the Academy's halls, wearing crisp uniforms where once they had worn threadbare cloth. Their presence had not gone unchallenged. The old families, the purest bloodlines of Elysium, bristled at what they called dilution. And none bristled more loudly than Ambassador Trelevic's son. Michael noticed him the moment they stepped out into the sunlight. Vexer Trelevic, his skin the pale lavender of an ancient lineage, leaned against the fountain in the center of the courtyard. His third eye followed Siri with a predator's fixation. His lips curled into a smirk. "Scholarship girl," he said, the words as sharp as glass. "Tell me, how does it feel to play dress-up in borrowed silk?" Siri kept walking, her expression smooth, almost serene. But Michael saw the tension in her shoulders, the way her patterns dimmed faintly, betraying what she would not show. "You'll choke on your jealousy one day, Vexer," Michael replied, voice even, but carrying enough steel to make nearby students pause. Vexer pushed away from the fountain, his entourage trailing like shadows. "Jealous? Of a human boy clinging to a slum rat for company?" His eyes narrowed. "Careful, Mercer. Your father's position won't shield you forever. The council remembers bloodlines, not charity cases." Michael stepped forward, fists curling, but Siri touched his wrist, gentle and firm. The contact pulsed between them, a faint glow at her skin where it met his. Michael froze, breath catching. The resonance. They had both felt it before in fleeting moments. An odd warmth, a strange clarity. But here, in the bright courtyard with half the academy watching, the glow shimmered unmistakably. Whispers rippled through the crowd. Ciri's hand trembled, her voice barely audible. "Michael, it's happening." He looked into her eyes, saw his own shock mirrored in their iridescence. "The resonance?" She nodded, cheeks coloring a deep indigo. When an Elysian finds their bonded mate, the glow cannot be hidden. Vexer's expression faltered for the first time, confusion flickering into something darker. He opened his mouth, but Ciri drew herself up, her voice carrying across the courtyard. "Resonance does not lie, Vexer. It does not care for lineage or privilege. It reveals truth." Gasps spread among the students. Even a few instructors had turned, their faces betraying awe, disbelief, and fear. Resonance bonds were rare. To see one manifest openly between a human and an Elysian was nothing short of scandalous. Michael swallowed hard, his mind spinning. He had no plan for this, no clever words. All he knew was the certainty and the warmth that surged between them, the unshakable clarity that he could never let her face this alone. At night, the glow returned when they stood in Jonathan's penthouse garden. Jonathan and Ciri's mother, Sifia, watched them quietly, their own hands intertwined. Then, almost without ceremony, Sifia extended her wrist. Beneath her skin, a faint glow pulsed. Jonathan placed his hand over it, and the light flared brighter. Michael stared. "You too?" Jonathan's voice was steady, but his eyes softened. "Yes, 3 years ago. We kept it private for political reasons. But the truth, Michael, is that resonance cannot be hidden forever." Ciri's mother smiled faintly, her illness long since healed, her elegance restored. "Your bond will face every prejudice we did, and worse. But it is not weakness. It is strength." Michael and Ciri exchanged a look, the glow between them pulsing stronger in answer. For the first time in his life, Michael Mercer understood what it meant to carry both the weight of his father's legacy and the promise of something entirely new. And as the city lights shimmered against the glass walls of the penthouse, he knew nothing would ever be the same again. The ancient grove lay at the heart of Elysium, older than the city, older even than the treaties that bound humans and Elysians together. Towering living trees arched toward the heavens, their branches entwined like cathedral spires, leaves shimmering with a natural bioluminescence that turned the clearing into a chamber of light. It was here that Jonathan Mercer and Sifia Nathal would marry, a ceremony meant not just to unite two families, but to stand as a living symbol of interspecies unity. Preparations spread across the grove like veins of light. Musicians tuned crystalline instruments. Floral attendants wove garlands from vines that had grown on the site for centuries. Security officers, both human and Elysian, moved with quiet vigilance along the perimeter. To the casual observer, it was a celebration in the making. But to Michael and Ciri, standing together near the elder arch, the grove was something else entirely a target. 3 nights earlier, their investigation had taken them deep into the Academy's restricted archives, chasing whispers of strange shipments rooted through maintenance tunnels beneath the grove. And the night before, they had overheard the truth with their own ears. Trelovik's operatives had planted explosives under the ceremonial arch. The plan was cruel and its elegance collapsed the grove at the moment of union, kill Jonathan and Sifia, shatter the initiative, and ignite outrage against human interference. Now, every rustle of leaves sounded like a fuse being lit. Michael scanned the grounds, his jaw tight. Security Chief Wren won't act without hard proof. If we say anything now, they'll lock us down, delay the wedding. Exactly what Trelovik wants. Ciri crouched near the arch, pretending to adjust her ceremonial sash as she tapped her wrist device. Schematics of the maintenance tunnels flickered in miniature. The charges are beneath the supports. Military grade, with tamper counters. If they're triggered remotely, we won't have time to evacuate anyone. Michael looked down at her, the glow of their resonance flaring faintly at the nearness of her touch. So we find them, disarm them, or at least expose them. Her silver hair shimmered as she shook her head. We can't disarm them without the proper sequence. One wrong move, and the arch collapses before the vows are spoken. A voice cut across the grove smooth, cold, unmistakable. How touching. They spun. Vexer Trelevic stepped out from the shadows, flanked by 2 Elysian enforcers in false maintenance uniforms. His third eye glinted with cruel satisfaction. The human boy and his pet, meddling again. Michael's fists clenched, but Ciri touched his arm lightly, grounding him. The glow pulsed stronger. "What are you planning, Vexer?" Ciri asked, her voice steady despite the tension in her frame. "What my father lacks the courage to admit openly," Vexer sneered. "Purity must be preserved. Your mother will die beneath this arch, and the world will see what comes of mixing filth with influence." Michael stepped forward, his voice low, dangerous. "You're bluffing. You wouldn't dare slaughter half the diplomatic corps on neutral soil, wouldn't I?" Vexer's smile was thin, merciless. "When chaos breaks, my father will emerge as the voice of reason, a savior calling for stability. And your precious initiative will be ashes." The enforcers advanced. Michael shifted, ready to fight, but Ciri grabbed his wrist, and suddenly the glow surged, so bright it spilled between their fingers like living fire. A wave of heat and clarity coursed through them both. Michael's fear vanished, replaced by a surge of strength. Ciri's breath hitched, her vision sharpening as though the world had slowed together. They moved. Michael slammed into the first enforcer, driving him back into the roots of the elder arch. Ciri twisted aside from the second, seizing a fallen branch and driving it against the enforcer's knee with surgical precision. Resonance thrummed between them, amplifying every strike, every movement, as if they were 2 halves of a single body. Vexer staggered back, stunned at the sight of the glow. "Impossible," he hissed. "No human could." Michael's fist connected with his jaw, cutting the words short. The enforcers collapsed. Vexer spat blood onto the mossy ground, his pale ridges darkening with rage. "You think you've won?" "The charges are set. The remote trigger is already primed. When the vows are spoken, the grove will fall." Ciri's eyes widened. "Where's the trigger, Vexer?" But he only laughed, clutching his bruised face. "Too late. Even resonance won't save you." As security sirens echoed faintly from the grove's perimeter, drawn by the commotion, Michael grabbed Ciri's hand. Their glow lit the roots beneath their feet. He met her gaze, his voice hard with resolve. "Then we don't stop the bomb. We stop the story. If we can show the world what he just confessed." Her eyes flared, iridescent with determination. "Broadcast it. Now." Michael tapped his communicator. Standard diplomatic protocol. Everything in range had been recorded. Trelevic's plan, Vexer's confession, every word. For the first time, fear flickered in Vexer's eyes, and as the grove filled with guards and guests alike, Michael and Ciri stood together beneath the elder arch, their hands entwined, the glow of resonance brighter than the stars above, ready to expose the truth or fall with it. Pandemonium broke like a storm through the ancient grove. Guests scattered from the elder arch, their ceremonial sashes trailing behind them, while security units surged forward with weapons drawn. The crystalline notes of tuning instruments shattered into discord as musicians fled. Yet in the chaos, Michael and Ciri stood firm, the resonance pulsing visibly where their hands clasped, illuminating them like a beacon. Vexer Trelevic, flanked by guards now flooding the grove, tried to twist free of their grasp on the narrative. "They lie!" he shouted, his voice cracking through the rising panic. "Do you hear me? These are fabrication's human tricks." But Michael was already transmitting. His communicator flared as the grove's towering display nodes, meant to project the ceremony for off-world dignitaries, activated at once. The air filled with the cold, unmistakable sound of Vexor's voice, captured in crystalline clarity. "Your mother will die beneath this arch, and the world will see what comes of mixing filth with influence." Gasps rolled across the assembly. Every dignitary, every attendant, every guest turned toward Vexor as his own words condemned him. Jonathan Mercer, entering with Scyphia at his side, froze mid-step beneath the elder trees as the truth thundered across the sacred clearing. "Enough!" Ambassador Trulevic's voice boomed, desperate and sharp. He forced his way through the stunned crowd, his ridges dark with fury. "This recording is manufactured, my son," but Michael cut him off with a voice steadier than he had ever heard it. "This isn't about my father or your lies. This is about the bombs you planted beneath the grove." Siri raised her wrist device, projecting schematics of the maintenance tunnels, glowing red where the explosives were hidden. Military-grade charges with dual failsafes. "We found them. We heard your operatives." Security forces broke into two factions, some rushing toward the tunnels to confirm the claim, others hemming in the Trulevic family. The ambassador's protests grew weaker with every passing second, drowned by the whispers, accusations, and fear around him. Then the ground shook. Not with detonation, but with the synchronized arrival of the grove's perimeter guards, who streamed into the clearing, carrying the deactivated explosives in armored cases. Proof indisputable and heavy as stone. A murmur swept the crowd, one word echoing again and again: resonance. All eyes shifted to Michael and Siri, their joined hands glowing with the undeniable sign of bond. Jonathan's gaze lingered on his son for a long heartbeat before he turned to face the ambassador. His voice was calm, measured, devastating. "Ambassador Trulevic, your conspiracy has been revealed. Not only against me and my fiancée, but against the stability of this world. The council will judge you." The ambassador's third eye narrowed, his ridges rippling with fury and shame. But he said nothing more as security bound Vexor and dragged him away. The ceremony resumed in the shadow of scandal. And yet, when Jonathan and Scyphia stepped beneath the elder arch, hand in hand, the grove felt more sacred than ever. Their resonance flared, silver-white and crimson gold entwined, as they spoke vows that blended human tradition with Elysian ritual. Voices hushed, hearts stilled, and when they sealed their bond beneath the living branches, the grove erupted in applause, and Song. Michael stood near the front, Siri at his side, both radiant in the glow that had already begun to shape whispers of legend. His chest swelled with pride as he watched his father, but also with the fierce certainty that this was only the beginning. Later, when the formalities ended and the guests dispersed to celebration halls, Jonathan found Michael leaning against one of the ancient trees. Siri stood close, her hand in his, the glow still pulsing faintly. "You struck Vexor in the courtyard," Jonathan said, his tone even. "Tonight, you stood in front of the galaxy and declared the truth. That's quite the progression." Michael's throat tightened. "I thought you'd be angry, that I'd embarrassed you." Jonathan shook his head, a wry smile tugging at his lips. "If you're going to throw punches, whether with your fist or your words, make sure they count." Tonight, they did. His gaze softened, moving to Siri. "Your resonance is not a weakness. It is a promise. One that will make enemies, but also change the future." Michael felt Siri's fingers squeeze his, steady and sure. The glow flared brighter between them, and in that moment, under the oldest trees of Elysium, Michael realized the turning point of his life had already come. His father had chosen compassion over caution, and so had he. Now it was their turn, the next generation, to carry that choice into whatever battles lay ahead. The night sky glittered through the grove's canopy. Somewhere beyond the stars, whispers of revolution had already begun. Ease high above. Ciri's breath hitched. Then she laughed softly, a sound bright as bells. She lifted him up, her hands cupping his face. Michael Mercer, I have loved you since the day you looked at me, not with fear, but with trust. Yes, 1,000 times yes. Their lips met beneath the elder arch, the resonance between them flaring so brightly that for a heartbeat the entire grove glowed with their light. Guests gasped and whispered, some in awe, some in disbelief. A few Elysians bowed their heads, as if in reverence to a phenomenon greater than tradition. But then something else happened. The glow did not fade. It deepened, spreading in luminous waves that traveled up their arms, across their chests, pulsing through them both until they stood surrounded by a halo of living light. It was not the fleeting shimmer of resonance seen in other bonds. It was permanent, rooted, as if their life forces had entwined. Scholars present murmured urgently, some recording, others already arguing. No texts had ever described a cross-species resonance so powerful. It was said resonance revealed what already existed. But this was something new, something that might rewrite the laws of biology and diplomacy alike. Jonathan and Scythia exchanged a glance, their own bond glowing softly at their joined wrists. They understood the weight of what the children had unleashed. As the crowd erupted in applause, cheers, and astonished chatter, Michael held Ciri close, their glow lighting the dusk like a second pair of suns. Later, when Jonathan found him standing with her beneath the swaying branches, he placed a hand on his son's shoulder. When I saw you with her on a park bench all those years ago, he said quietly, I thought I was only choosing kindness. I never imagined I was witnessing the beginning of something that might change the future of 2 worlds. Michael met his father's eyes. Maybe kindness was always the future. Dad, we just had to believe it. Jonathan smiled faintly, then looked at Ciri. Take care of each other. The galaxy will have its opinions. Let them argue. You two have already proven what matters. The music rose again, voices blending in harmony. And beneath the ancient living arch, Michael and Ciri danced together, their glow painting the grove in gold and silver light. For the first time in generations, Elysium and Earth looked upon a bond not as a fracture between peoples, but as a bridge. And as the twin suns sank beyond the horizon, every witness to that night understood they had seen more than a wedding, more than a proposal. They had seen the dawn of a new era, one that began with a wealthy father, a homeless girl, and a choice to do what was right.